Grüß, willkommen in einer Fragens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 12 of my battle series of videos. This video will cover the Battle of Cannae, which was a battle fought between the Carthaginians and Romans on the 2nd of August 216 BC, close to the town of Cannae. This video is mainly focused on looking at this battle from a figure gaming point of view, which includes order of battle, troop types and flow of the battle. If you wish a big picture of why the battle was fought, then this may not be the video for you. But if you want to know about the troop types, force mixes and what actually occurred on the battlefield, then continue to watch on. While there are some reasonable sources by ancient standards on this battle, there is, as normal, a lot of gaps which can only be filled by guesswork. I will select the versions, or guesses, which seems the most reasonable and use them as my baseline, but will mention other sources if applicable. I'll first cover the order battle and troop types of the Roman army. According to Polybius, the Roman forces consisted of 86,400 men, which broken down into 80,000 infantry and 6,400 cavalry. While confirming numbers is almost impossible, this is about the best number we have. I suspect this is based on the Romans raising 8 legions, which each consisted of 5,000 infantry and 300 cavalry, with an accompanied allied force of 5,000 men and 900 cavalry. As is my normal practice, I go back to some board games and look at the force mixes in the board games to give me some idea of whether or not these numbers are reasonable. The first one is Lost Battle. This book, and also board game, Lost Battle, shows the Roman army consisted of 12 average legionaries, 1 average light infantry, 2 levy light infantry, and 3 average heavy cavalry. If the cavalry represents 6,400 cavalry, then each unit represents about 2,100 cavalry. Based on this ratio, the 12 Allied legions, ALEs, represent about 25,200 legionnaires, which seems rather low. The scale for the infantry is probably 3,800 men per unit. Anyway, I'm not going to really use this source because I don't think I can actually convert this into real numbers. If we go to another board game, in this case the SPI Spartan board game, then the Roman army consists of 20 units of swordsmen, 8 units of militia spearmen, probably allied troops, 9 barbarian infantry, also allied, and 3 skirmisher units. As this totals 45 units, I expect each unit represents about 2,000 men each. Part of the Roman army was guarding a camp, possibly 14,000, who escaped. This means the army was 72,400 men in size. So each unit represents, let's say, 1,600 men. As all the cavalry was probably present, and it numbered 6,400 cavalry, then dividing this by 1,600 gives us 4, which is the number of units in the battle. There's lots of guesswork here, but I can get a better idea of the actual numbers of troops using this particular board game. Let's try and convert all this into a definitive statement in terms of strength. Per contemporary Roman sources, for the first time ever, the Senate introduced 8 legions, each consisted of 5,000 foot soldiers and 300 cavalry, with allied troops numbering the same of foot soldiers, but 900 cavalry per legion, more than triple the legions' numbers. 8 legions, some 40,000 Roman soldiers, and an estimated 2,400 cavalry formed the core of this massive new army. As we also have some good material from Polybius concerning the structure of the Roman legion, let's just quickly go over it. Polybius indicates the legion consists of 4,200 men, but could be filled out to 5,000 men in emergency. The legion consisted of 1,200 hastati, 1,200 principal, and 600 triadi. Polybius also does not mention this, but we could assume an additional 1,200 veliti, which gives us 4,200 men, although I'm not sure they were called velites at this particular point in time. The legion had a cavalry force of 300, although I'm uncertain if this was in addition to the 4,200 men, or if it had to be included separately. The source I'm using assumes this was added separately, so I'm going to assume in most cases cavalry are counted separately. We do have some minor issues with this. If the legion was raised to 5,000 men in an emergency, I'm uncertain what this actually means in terms of troop types. Could it simply mean more velites or light troops? I'm uncertain. Goldsworth states the triadi were not increased in number, so perhaps all the rest were. The most logical assumption was the century size increased from 60 to 80 men, so each maniple consisted of 160 men instead of 120 men. This gives you a strength of 5,000 foot. Goldsworth also claims the legion could reach a size of 6,000 men, possibly by increasing the size of the Veliti companies' sized formations as well. Dando Collins states that by 218 BC, the legions had a strength of 5,200 foot and 300 cavalry. Once again, the composition is unknown, but the easy assumption is that Triadi century size was also increased to 80 men each. For comparison purposes, this shows the structure of a standard consular army, and you should note at Cannae the Romans deployed twice this number of legions, which may have had a greater strength than shown here each. That covers as much numbers information I have. Let's look at the troop types. I generally use DBMM army list to give me an idea of the troop types available to the Romans in the period. This shows the core troops available for the Romans during the period this battle was fought. While the Romans only had 2,400 Roman cavalry, which is 8 by 300, that's 8 legions by 300 cavalry, they were considered as reasonable quality in the army list. In addition, the Romans had about 3,600 allied cavalry, with a quarter being reasonable quality and the remainder considered as an inferior according to these army lists. It's very unlikely the Romans had any light cavalry, although it's possible part of the allied cavalry may have consisted of Tarentine light cavalry. During this battle, the Romans would not have possessed any Gaelic and especially Spanish cavalry. In Spain, the Roman army may have had allied Spanish cavalry, but not for this battle. The bedrock of the Roman army were the legionaries, or the hastati and principes, to be specific. It's assumed the Italian allies were armed in the Roman manner. This line here represents the velites. I'm uncertain why they're called levies in the army list. Later you can upgrade these troops to a high-quality velites. I expect probably in 2016 BC they were not called velites, and thus the army list says they're called levies. The triadi were the spear-armed Romans, normally in the third line and consisting of the most experienced troops as well as the oldest. I have to assume that some of these troops may not have been very experienced, considering how quickly so many legions were raised. According to DBMM, the Romans would select the high-quality allied troops to form special reserve formations, which is what this troop type represents. I'm uncertain if they actually existed in this battle because I have found no specific sources, but DBMM normally bases its army lists on actual historical sources, so I assume there must be something out there somewhere. It's possible some skirmish archers were present, but I suspect they would be in very low numbers. As with the archers, it's possible some slingers were also present, but these were also probably in very small numbers. As with the cavalry, it's unlikely or virtually impossible that any Spanish or Illyrian troops were present in the Roman army at this time. The army list also lists these specific modifications to the army list for the period that the Battle of Cannae was fought. Several of the Roman legions may have been raw, considering how they were raised. This is a reasonable assumption. It's also possible some of the Allied infantry were deployed in their traditional form, which would have been in a looser formation armed with javelins. Now it's time to cover the Carthaginian army. The Carthaginian army was varied, to say the least, but Hannibal had a corps of highly experienced veterans with a large number of Gaelic troops supporting him. If we look at the Lost Battles board game / book Order of Battle, we can see the Carthaginian force mix. As there are better sources, I'm only showing this as an FYI. If we look at the SPI Spartan board game, we can see this force mix. As with Lost Battles, I'm not going to use this information, as I do have better sources, and I think a lot of these troop types don't make much sense. According to the ancient sources I have, the Carthaginian infantry consisted an estimate 8,000 Libyans, 5,500 Galutians, 16,000 Gauls, mainly Boli and Insurberi. 8,000 were left at the camp the day of the battle, and 8,000 of several tribes of Hispania, including Iberians, Celtiberians and Lusitanians. Hannibal commanded 4,000 Numidians, 2,000 Iberian Peninsula or troops, light troops, 4,000 Gaelic, and 450 Libyan Phoenician cavalry. Finally, Hannibal had an auxiliary skirmisher contingent consisting of 1,000 to 2,000 Balearic slingers and 6,000 mixed nationality javelin, possibly including Lusitanians among them. This shows a possible Carthaginian army composition. The Libyans and Spanish may well have been equipped with captured Roman armour, although it's more likely they retained their traditional fighting style. Let's now look at the troop types, again using DBMM version 2.1 army list. This shows the core troops of the Carthaginian army. The list is small because the Carthaginian armies of various battles were very dependent on what troops were around, but these were generally always present. Based on our sources, we know the Carthaginians had 450 Libyan Phoenician cavalry. The Carthaginian would have also possessed 4,000 Numidian cavalry, which were used to pin down one of the Roman cavalry flank forces. The Libyan spearmen were the highest quality troops within the Carthaginian army. They would have been equipped with captured Roman armour at this point in time. The Carthaginians also had 6,000 javelin. Some may have been armed with bows or slings, but the bulk of them would have been javelin. The army list does show bolt shooters. However, I'm unaware the Carthaginians ever used bolt shooters in this battle. I suspect not. The army list lists the following special options for Carthage before 201 BC, which does cover our 216 BC battle. The Carthaginians had 2,000 Spanish cavalry, most of which were medium cavalry and reasonable quality. The Carthaginians also had 8,000 Spanish foot, most of which would have been medium infantry. I suspect any skirmishers were in the skirmish total. The Carthaginians also had from between 1,000 and 2,000 Balearic slingers, and these were highly efficient slingers. To the best of my knowledge, no elephants were present in this battle. Finally, the army list also shows these special troop types. The Carthaginians, when not in Spain, had the following troop types available before 201 BC. This primarily represents the Gaelic troops. The Carthaginians would have had 4,000 Gaelic cavalry, most of which were medium cavalry and reasonable quality. The Carthaginians had at least 16,000 Gaelic infantry, half of which were kept in the camp. They may have also been enhanced with Roman armour, which was captured in the previous battle. I'm really uncertain how many Ligurians were in the Carthaginian army for this particular battle, but here they are. Finally, the special options specifically for the Battle of Cannae are listed here. Basically, it shows that Hannibal was a very, very good general. As I indicated earlier, the Libyan infantry would have been equipped with Roman armour, which gave them a significant enhancement, as you can see with this upgrade. Under the command of Hannibal, the Gaelic troops are regarded as regular rather than being irregular. This basically means they are easier to command. There is no doubt that under Hannibal they operated in a very professional and efficient manner. It's highly unlikely Hannibal had any Italian allies at this battle, although it's possible a few from the Samnite areas may have joined his army. Just as a complete FYI, this is a modern monument near the site of the Battle of Cannae. As you can see here, reasonably flat territory. There is a lot of disagreement on the location of the actual battlefield. This is the deployment according to Wiki. The Carthaginian left flank breaks through and swings over to the right of the Roman left flank to assist the Numidians. Meanwhile, the Roman centre advances. The Roman left flank is broken and the Numidians pursue. The Carthaginian cavalry now swings back and hits the Romans in the rear. In the meantime, the African infantry engages the Roman flanks and starts pushing them back, while the Roman centre continues to advance into the pocket. Most historians feel the battle occurred on the same side of the river as Cannae, but the course of the battle is probably correct. In this account, which comes from Warfare in the Classical World by John Worry, shows a slightly different layout. I suspect the actual map and deployment is more accurate. However, some battlefield events seems suspect in this scenario. The Romans take up battle lines, Hannibal follows suit. The Romans form up extra deep because of the narrowness of the plain. They aim to crush Hannibal's centre. Hannibal pins his hopes on his cavalry, placing his heavy cavalry on the left and the Numidians on the right. He bows his centre forward, also making it deeper than the flanks in order to delay the legion's advance. The African infantry is kept in reserve behind each flank of the crescent. Both sides leave troops to guard the camps. The Romans aim to capture Hannibal's camp. Let's look at the flow of the battle in a little bit more detail with this theory. The battle opens with skirmishing. Hannibal's left cavalry are launched and hit the Roman right, which gives way under the weight of numbers. The heavy infantry clash and the Spanish and Celts are forced back. The Median skirmish with the allied cavalry on the Roman left flank, while Hasdrubal swings his heavy cavalry across the back of the Roman infantry towards the allies, that is the allied cavalry. Thus threatened, they break and run, taking Varro with them. Meanwhile, the crescent is holding and the Africans advance in column on the flanks and then turn inward. Hasdrubal, who commands the cavalry, turns into the Roman rear while the Carthaginian light troops move around into the rear as well as supporting the centre. Paulus, the surviving Roman commander, strives to keep the Romans fighting, even ordering his escorts to dismount, but to no avail. 45,500 infantry and 2,700 cavalry are killed. 300 to 500 infantry and 1,000 to 2,000 cavalry are captured. Paulus, Servilius and Minicus are dead. 7,000 Romans escape to the smaller camp. 2,000 to Cannae, but they are surrounded and captured. Hannibal takes both camps and more prisoners. He has only lost 6,000 to 8,000 infantry. Most historians think the Carthaginians held Cannae as it contained supplies. Also, the Carthaginian cavalry first assisted the Numidians before hitting the Romans in the rear, possibly, although I must admit that particular part of the scenario does seem a little bit more logical. One of the better accounts of Cannae comes from the History Marche channel on YouTube. This shows the position of the opposing forces in the morning while the Romans were forming up for battle. The Romans are on the right, which is red, and the Carthaginians on the left, which is green. According to this account, the battlefield was 2,000 metres wide, with a river on the Carthaginian left and rough ground on the right. You'll also notice Cannae is controlled by the Carthaginians, with a small detachment in there. In this account, Hannibal's army deployed on the field consisted of 50,000 men, with the Roman army consisting of 86,400 men. This is probably as good a number as any I've seen, so is the one I generally agree with. This shows the two lines slowly closing together, with the Carthaginian left flank engaging first, quickly defeating the Roman cavalry, which begin to rout. This shows both main lines engaging, with the Romans pushing back the Carthaginian centre, which has been extended. This shows the Romans on the verge of breaking through the Carthaginian centre, but you'll notice the Carthaginians had unengaged troops on their sides, the Libyan spearmen. These were ready to drive into the Roman flanks. We can now see the Carthaginian cavalry returning from their pursuit of the Roman cavalry, with the Roman cavalry being their target, that is the Roman cavalry on the left flank, which is actually allied cavalry. According to this account, Varro saw this and ordered the retreat of his cavalry. With the Carthaginian centre in retreat, the Carthaginian ordered the Libyan spearmen forward, which then struck the Roman flanks and disrupted their advance. Behind the Romans, the Carthaginian cavalry was also approaching. The encirclement is now complete. You'll notice the Roman flanks were not encircled, only the central forces. I suppose this was to explain how 14,000 Romans managed to escape. The result was a total disaster for the Romans. I would encourage anyone to seek out the History Marche channel on YouTube. I have provided a link which provides some information about the battle. There are other videos which cover the manoeuvring which occurs prior to the battle, which is also rather interesting. Often when gamers refight a battle, they start at the point both sides are ready to engage. Most battles also consisted of manoeuvring prior to the battle, with each side trying to achieve an advantage over the other. I've replayed this battle using the Lost Battles board game using figures, and also the SPI Spartan board game using figures, and I'll tell you now, it's very hard for the Carthaginians to win. This is a hard battle to create a scenario for, in my conclusion. Lost Battle does it by giving command a major significant power, and thus Hannibal has enormous godlike capacity. The SPI pre-stag game does it by having both sides reasonably equal in strength. I suppose Lost Battles may have the better approach, but I must admit the importance these rules give to generals is interesting and does kind of give me a rather unusual feeling of the way the battle actually flowed. I suppose it's the only way you can actually get a historical result from this battle. And so this completes episode 12 of my military history videos covering the Battle of Cannae. I find this battle an excellent test for any game system. If you can reproduce this battle with the historical outcome, then your game system is almost certainly very good, or at least your scenario is. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.